Your online application's starting to fail. It's crawling on the network just as fast as a snail. We need evented programming starting from the top. Better write some code so the world doesn't stop. With the non-blocking model, we will be just fine. Built on Google Chrome's V8 runtime. And all you need to do is write some JavaScript code and use the real-time web with Node.
You're watching Real-Time Web with Node, and this is level 6, where we're going to be taking a look at Socket.io. Obviously, this is called real-time. Node is really good at real-time apps. So let's start building a real-time app. We're going to be building a chat application in the browser using WebSockets. Traditionally, a browser's request and response cycle looks something like this, where the browser sends a request to the server, waits around for it to get back, and then whenever it gets back, it then renders on to the page. These days, modern browsers have WebSockets. WebSockets allow us to create a connection with each of our clients to the server. Over this connection, we can send and receive data from the server back and forth in real time. However, we can't rely on every browser working with WebSockets, so we need to use a library or a module that has intelligent fallbacks in case the WebSocket doesn't work. In this case, we're going to be using the Socket.io library. Let's install Socket.io. We'll just do npm install Socket.io --save, so it'll install it and also add it to our package.json. Then inside of our application, we'll require the Express module. We'll initialize an Express application. Then we'll create an HTTP server and have it dispatch requests to Express. Also, we'll require the Socket.io module and also allow it to use the HTTP server to listen for requests. So now Socket.io and Express are sharing the same HTTP server. We'll then need to listen for connection events inside Socket.io, and when a client connects, we're simply going to log out client connected to the console. We'll serve our index.html file using the send file function we've seen earlier. And lastly, we'll have our server listen on port 8080. Now in the HTML that we're going to be sending through Express, we need to include the Socket.io library. This will get loaded in our client's browsers and connect to our Socket.io server. Let's add one more thing to our connection event. Here we're going to call client emit messages hello world. So this is emitting the messages event on our client, which in this case is our browser, and we're going to send the object hello world. Then, inside of our browser, we're going to listen for that messages event. When it gets called, we'll call alert, and then we'll have it alert with the data that it received, looking up the hello property, which has a value of world. So let's run our code. First, we'll start up our Node server. Then if we jump into our browser, go to the right port, it'll connect using Socket.io, send a message back into our browser, and we'll get an alert pop up. We even get the log message that a client successfully connected. And every time we refresh, it's going to reconnect. So our browser's listening for messages, but we're going to want to send messages from our browser when somebody types something into the chat room back to our server. So we also want our server to listen for the messages event, and when it does, we'll log it out to our console for now. We then need to write some JavaScript code that will run inside the browser so that when somebody submits new code into the chat room, in this case we're going to just do some jQuery, we'll hook onto the chat form submit button, so when somebody hits submit, we'll grab the message out of the chat input text field, grab the value from there, set that equal to the message variable. Then we'll emit that messages event on the server by calling socket.emit messages and simply send in the message that they typed into that form field. Now we'll start up our Node server again. And if we go into our browser reconnect. Now we'll jump back into our browser, type in hello, this is dog, and we can see that hello, this is dog got printed out back on the console, and we can go back and forth, and it works pretty well. So we know how to send messages from the server to the client and the client to the server. But this is a chat room, so we're going to be having multiple clients connecting to our server, and we're going to need to broadcast somebody's text that they send to the chat room to everybody. Luckily, Socket.io has a broadcast property, and when you call emit on that broadcast property with messages, it's going to send them to all the other connected sockets. In this case, all the other clients in the chat room. So now back on our server, when our server receives the message event, this time around, it's going to call client.broadcast.emit messages data. That's going to broadcast the message to all the other clients aside from this one that sent the message. Back on the client side, we're going to revise the messages listener. In this case, when we get a messages event, we simply want to insert the message onto the screen. Now, I'm not going to show you that insert message function, but you can imagine it just uses some jQuery to insert that text onto the screen. So let's run our server again. Go to localhost 8080. We're going to actually call up another browser and go to the same port, so we have two clients connected. So now when we type in a message, we say, hello, this is dog, we can see that it broadcasted it to the other client. Then we can say, hello, no, this is Spider. And we can see that it broadcast that message to our other client and also logged it out to the console. But you might notice we have no idea who's saying what on this chat server. We probably need some usernames. So how might we implement that? Well, maybe what we'll do on the server side is we'll create a join event. When somebody calls join, we'll assume they're going to send in a name variable, and then we'll set a value on the client. Client.nickname equals name. Setting values this way means that the value is available both on the server and the client. Then back on our client, when we connect to the server, we're going to print out a little status so we know that we're connected. Then we'll prompt the user, call that simple JavaScript function prompt, what is your nickname? Then we'll take that value and emit the join event, sending in the nickname back to the server. Now back in our server, we need to change our messages listener so that before we broadcast the message, we get the nickname of the client, and then once we've retrieved the nickname, we'll have a callback here, which will then broadcast our message with our username. Lastly, if you're in a chat room, you still get to see what you type in. So why don't we just go ahead and emit the chat message on the current client, the one that invoked the message event, so that when we type in some code and hit return, we'll see what we typed back in the browser. Let's go ahead and try out this new code. One browser will go. It should prompt us for our username. This one's dog. Let's start up another browser. And this person's nickname is Spider. And we can see dog joined the chat, Spider joined the chat. Now if we type in a message, it shows us who's typing what. Can you feel the real time? With Socket.io, I bet you can. All the communication going back and forth. Have some fun with the challenges. I'll see you in the next level.